What if I told you land lost in chaos? This is how America was born.
What if I told you a land once unknown to the world would rise from chaos, rebellion, and bloodshed to become the most powerful nation on earth? This is not just history, this is the unbelievable story of how America was born. In a time long before skyscrapers touched the clouds and cities lit up the night like stars on earth, the vast land now known as the United States was wild, untamed, and full of life. Forests stretched endlessly, rivers flowed freely, and countless indigenous nations lived in harmony with nature. They hunted, farmed, built communities, and created cultures that were deeply connected to the land. But everything began to change in the late 15th century. In 1492, a determined explorer named Christopher Columbus sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, searching for a new route to Asia. Instead, he stumbled upon a new world, a discovery that would reshape human history forever. Although Columbus never reached mainland America, his journey sparked a wave of exploration that brought European powers rushing toward these lands. Spain, France, and Britain all wanted control, but it was Britain that would eventually plant the seeds of a future superpower. In 1607, a group of English settlers established the first permanent colony in Jamestown. Life there was brutally difficult. Disease spread quickly, food was scarce, winters were deadly. Many settlers died within the first few years, yet somehow they survived. And that survival marked the beginning of something far greater. Over the next century, more colonies were established along the eastern coastline. These eventually became known as the 13 colonies. Each colony developed its own identity. Some focused on farming, others on trade, and some became centers of religion and education.
But despite their growth, they were all under British rule. At first, this didn't seem like a problem, until it did. By the mid-1700s, Britain had begun imposing heavy taxes on the colonies. Laws like the Stamp Act and the Tea Act forced colonists to pay money without having any representation in British government. This created anger, frustration, and eventually rebellion. The colonists began to protest. They boycotted British goods. They held secret meetings. They spoke openly about freedom. Then came a moment that shocked the world, the Boston Tea Party. Colonists, disguised as Native Americans, boarded British ships and dumped entire shipments of tea into the harbor. It was no longer just protest, it was defiance, and Britain would not tolerate it. In 1775, war broke out. The American Revolution had begun. On one side stood the British Empire, one of the most powerful military forces in the world. On the other side stood a group of colonies with limited resources, little training, and almost no chance of winning. But they had something stronger than weapons. They had belief. Leading them was a man who would become a legend, George Washington. He was not the most experienced general, nor did he have the strongest army, but he had determination, patience, and an unbreakable spirit. The war was long and brutal. Winters were freezing. Soldiers lacked food, clothing, and supplies. Many deserted. Many died. But they kept fighting because they believed in something bigger than themselves: freedom. Then came a moment that shocked the world: the Declaration of Independence. A powerful document was adopted, the Declaration of Independence. It boldly stated that the colonies were no longer under British rule. They were now free. This was more than just a statement. It was a risk. If they lost the war, they would be executed as traitors. But they didn't back down. Years passed. Battles were fought. Lives were lost. And then, in 1783, the impossible happened. The colonies won. America was born. A new nation, built not on kings or empires, but on ideas, liberty, equality, and self-governance. But victory brought new challenges. How do you build a country from nothing? How do you unite people with different beliefs, backgrounds, and interests? In 1787, leaders gathered to answer these questions. They created the Constitution, a system of government unlike anything the world had seen before. It divided power, protected rights, and gave citizens a voice. It was an experiment, one that could have easily failed, but it didn't.
Instead, it became the foundation of a nation that would continue to grow, expand, and evolve. And grow it did. In 1803, the United States made a deal that would change its future forever, the Louisiana Purchase. Overnight, the size of the country doubled. Explorers were sent west. Among them were Lewis and Clark, who journeyed into unknown lands filled with danger, mystery, and opportunity. Settlers followed. They built homes, they built towns, they built a future. But this expansion came at a terrible cost. Native American tribes were forced from their lands. Entire communities were displaced. Cultures were destroyed. One of the darkest events was the Trail of Tears, a forced migration that led to the deaths of thousands. The nation was growing, but it was also struggling with its conscience. And soon, that struggle would explode into its most devastating conflict yet. To be continued.